Hello and welcome to part 5 of Knitting Machines for Beginners. I'm Charlie and today I'm going to tell you how you can increase stitches when you are knitting. So for example, you might want to do this if you imagine this was a sleeve for a jumper and it needs to get wider and wider and wider as it goes towards the shoulder. So there are various different ways of doing it and we'll run through a few different ways. For the first couple of ways, it's going to be very important that we know something about our carriages. It's very important that we have our carriages set up so that when a needle is right the way to the forwards, like that, called holding position, it actually gets knitted back as the carriage goes past. On older Knitmaster machines, this tends to be done with some buttons marked P and R. When the P button is pushed down, this one will knit needles back when it's going right to left. This one will knit needles back when it's going left to right. On newer Knitmaster machines, there's a thing on the side which tends to be marked circle or triangle. Can't remember which one's which, but you'll have to try. On Brother machines, here is a one that I'm stripping for parts. There's this lever here marked 1, 2 and 3, and you want the levers set to 1. So that, you know what, I won't explain what's going on inside there. So that you can make sure that they knit back. This is only important for the first two methods, but nevertheless, you need to do some experiments before you knit to make sure that your needles knit back from holding position to working position as the thing goes past. Now, our first method of increasing is very, very simple, and it's called a simple increase. And you can only increase it on the side that the carriage is. Okay, so I can only increase it on this side, on this row, and it's dead simple. You just bring a needle forwards, okay, and then you knit past. And you can see it's now 1 stitch wider. Okay, then if I want to increase on this side, forward it comes. Oops, daisy. That's what I meant to do. And forward we go. And it's got 1 stitch more. And another one. And another one. And another one. Okay, and that's fairly straightforward. Once it gets quite a bit wider, you'll need to rehang your weights so that they're accurately pulling the stitches off the needle properly. Okay, so that's method 1, and that's a nice straightforward way of getting wider. Now, method 1, the simple increase, has got a sort of a variation for if you want to increase several stitches at once. Again, you can only do it on the carriage side of the knitting, but let's say if I want to increase 5 stitches at once, what I would do is I'll put forward 5 needles, and in the last video we looked at E-wrapping. We're going to E-wrap the 5 needles, going around in an E shape like that. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Right, now if I do that when I knit across, you will see I've increased a whole bunch of stitches all at once. I'm now going to hang this on there like that to make sure they all pull off. And on this side I shall also increase 5 needles. Because I'm going this way, it needs to be a reverse E. So it goes under and around, 2, 3, 4 and 5. And then I'm just going to gently push all these down. Now actually I've made these a little bit on the tight side, so this might be a bit dodge knitting across. We will find out in a second. No, it went through all right. Okay, and in a minute we'll take this off and we'll have a look at what it looks like. So those are your simple increases, and they're a very reliable, simple and safe way to increase. However, they're not perfect. When we get to it, I'll turn over the knitting and you can see why they're not perfect. But you can sort of see here already, which is that you've got these sort of loops going down the knitting like that on the increases. That's not the prettiest thing in the world. Now, if you're going to hide it in a hem, it's not a problem. But there is a much nicer way to increase. And in fact, this is the way that I do it all the time, which is called the fully fashioned increase. This has a couple of advantages, starting with the idea that you can increase at both sides of the knitting on the same row, so you can get it quite wide quite fast. Now, for this you need a transfer tool. So a transfer tool has got 3 little needles, as in sewing needles, poking out of one end, and this one has got 1 poking out the other. And it doesn't matter whether you do a 2-stitch fully fashioned transfer or a 3-stitch fully fashioned transfer, but you will need the ones that have got one single needle on the other end. You can even do a 1-stitch fully fashioned transfer. I'm going to do it with 3 stitches, but it doesn't matter whether you do 1, 2 or 3. What you do is you hook the transfer tool, making sure all these latches are open. You hook the transfer tool over the final 3 stitches on one side and you pull all the needles out like that, and then you push them in, and what happens is the 3 stitches get transferred onto my transfer tool, and I simply move them out one, push forward the needles and hook them onto the next 3 available needles. So can you see what I've done is I've created a gap. I'm just going to tip them up and tip those stitches on. I've created a gap in the knitting. Now I need to fill that gap, which is where my single transfer needle comes in, because I put my transfer needle up, okay, and I pull the heel of the stitch from the previous row. I pull that out and I put it back on the empty needle, and I have increased a stitch, and I can do that at both ends. So I can do it this end as well, like so. And I can, now you can see this takes slightly longer obviously, but it gives you a much nicer effect. So it's up to you, I guess, which one you want to do. As I said, this one gives you a much nicer effect, which you can actually show off. So if I do this, and I'll do it a few times and you'll be able to see the effect. So I'm going to do this over 3 or 4 rows, and this will come back in a minute when I've increased over 3 or 4 rows and show you the effect that it has. Hold on, let me just put this on. There we go. Pick up the heel. Has to be said, Brother machines are generally much easier to do this on than Knitmaster machines, but they can be done on both. Of course, it doesn't particularly help that I have a camera in the way. I'll just quickly do it on this side. With a bit of practice at this, especially when you're sitting at the machine, not standing behind a camera, you can get this reasonably fast. Now, I'm just going to do a couple more rows and I'll show you. Right, here we are with the final results. Okay, so let's have a look on this side of the knitting. So here's some straight knitting. Now here's my first increases, which you can see leave some loops which need to be hidden in a hem. The next bit was this straight increase, which is just a nice E-wrap. And then finally, if you're going to have a look at the fully fashioned increase, it's a bit difficult to see, but you should be able to see that the last 3 stitches are sort of branching off to the left, and the increase is happening up this row here. So if that's on a hem, and it's nicely done, you just get a nice little row and it just looks like it's bending away. That's my favourite sort of increase. But there we are. I appear to have knitted the front of a pair of briefs for a very small person. But that's that, and I shall see you next lesson where we're going to have a look at decreasing so we can do even more shaping. See you next time.